Good evening. I'm Ellison Barber in for Tom Llamas. Tonight, millions on high alert as a nasty snowstorm brings dangerous conditions across the Great Lakes. Right now, parts of New York are under a state of emergency. Take a look at this terrifying video out of Michigan. A box truck losing control, slamming into a fire truck. Firefighters forced to run out of the way just as they were responding to another crash. The box truck driver suffering from minor injuries. Dozens of cars and semi-trucks stuck on a road in upstate New York as the snow quickly piles up. Several drivers spinning out and getting trapped in snowbanks. Take a listen.
Did you guys just come off the road?
No, a couple hours ago.
You've been stuck here for a couple hours?
Yeah.
We might be able to get you out here in a second. I don't know about you. You're really in there.
Those cars were eventually pulled out, but more than a foot of snow is expected in some areas, and those flakes are coming down fast as strong winds quickly reduce visibility. These videos from I-90 just south of Buffalo, New York, showing just how tough it is to drive right now. This all coming on the heels of last night's storm that walloped parts of the Northeast. This dramatic video of a tunnel in Boston completely flooded. Cars look like they're driving through a river. And out west, crews continue to battle the Malibu wildfire that has forced thousands from their homes. For more on this storm and those fire conditions, we want to begin with NBC News meteorologist Bill Cairns. Hey, Bill.
Allison, when western New York can't keep up with the snow, it tells you just how intense and how bad it is. They're the best at clearing snow in the entire country. They get this all the time every winter. But this has been a fire hose coming off of Lake Erie. You can just see it. It's narrow. It's not wide. It's mostly missed Buffalo. But just south of Buffalo, the snow has been coming down inches per hour for the last 24 hours. Orchard Park right here, home of the Buffalo Bills, one of the spots. And right along Interstate 90, those cars were trapped on Route 20. And some of these snow totals are now approaching 3 feet. Hamburg, New York, 28. Eden's on the top of the list at 32. And it is still snowing in all of these areas. So as we go throughout the night tonight, we're going to see some additional snowfall in the range of around 3 to 6 inches just south of Buffalo, an additional 6 to 12 just south of Watertown. And the cold air is continuing to pour in. The lakes aren't frozen yet, and that's why we're getting these intense lake effect bands anytime we get these cold outbreaks. It's still negative 25 wind chill in Duluth. And tomorrow morning, it's going to be very cold in the Northeast. Some of the coldest of the season. New York City is going to feel like 18, 11 in Maine, 12 in Vermont, 3 in Buffalo. And the lake effect snow should be coming to an end as we go throughout tonight into tomorrow morning. The winds will shift directions. It gets a little bit warmer by the time we get to Saturday, but we really don't get like significantly warmer until we get towards Sunday. Then we get a break from all of this, Allison. But yeah, western New York, very dangerous travel right through the night tonight. All
right, we'll keep an eye on all of that. Bill Cairns, thank you so much. We appreciate it. We're going to turn now to that other breaking news we've been following. New details tonight on the alleged escape route of the CEO shooting suspect, Luigi Mangione. Investigators mapping out how they believe he managed to evade police for 5 days. It all comes as fears mount over threats made against other high-profile executives. NBC's Stephanie Gosk has the latest.
Tonight, new details about how police say Luigi Mangione fled New York City after allegedly murdering UnitedHealthcare CEO Brian Thompson. The NYPD said they lost the shooter after he took off from the scene on an e-bike into Central Park, ending up at a bus station in uptown Manhattan. The chief of detectives now says Mangione got on the subway from there and went back downtown, revealing the details in an interview with NBC News' Jonathan Dienst.
We believe he may have taken the subway back to Penn Station and then made his way to Philadelphia from there.
The chief says he then traveled west to Pittsburgh and then back east to Altoona, withdrawing money from an ATM and paying for everything with cash along the way. When Mangione was arrested 5 days after the murder, police say he had thousands of dollars in his bag. He also had this gun, according to police. The chief laying out how the NYPD crime lab matched it to shell casings left behind at the murder scene.
That is by an NYPD detective test firing that gun and then matching the ejection marks from the casings to the casings that we fired.
He says they still don't know where Mangione got the weapon.
The gun itself, it is a ghost gun. It is a receiver that comes from a gun manufacturer from parts, and then the gun was built up from a 3D printer.
As the case takes shape against Mangione in New York, the alleged murderer remains in a Pennsylvania prison. Today, his attorney filed a petition contesting his detention, arguing Pennsylvania has not proven Mangione was in New York the day of the murder or provided probable cause that he was responsible for the crime. A hearing for extradition has been scheduled for December 30th. New York Governor Kathy Hochul says she's been coordinating with Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro.
Governor and I both want him brought back to New York as soon as possible.
And there is real concern, officials say, that there could be copycat violence.
This incident has created a torrent of online reactions, many of which cross over into a more uncomfortable realm of territory that we would think of as closer to threats.
The support for Mangione ranges from shared anger over the healthcare industry to actually being sympathetic towards the violence, according to Clint Watts, an expert on cybersecurity.
What we're seeing, which is always the most dangerous situation, is people either condoning violence or maybe mobilizing to violence. That's where the concern is right now, if that contagion effect that could take off.
And Stephanie Gosk joins us now from Hollidaysburg, Pennsylvania. Stephanie, did we get more information from the police about the months leading up to this alleged crime?
Yeah, Allison, we learned a couple of things from the chief. He said that the family filed a missing persons report on Luigi Mangione. And we also learned that when he arrived in New York City on November 24th, that was 10 days before the murder, he knew exactly when and where the UnitedHealthcare conference was set to begin, Allison.
Stephanie Gosk in Pennsylvania, thank you. Turning now to those drone sightings over New Jersey and other East Coast states. They're not only causing concern, but there's growing frustration over the lack of information about them. NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Ryan Nobles reports on the lawmakers now also demanding answers.
This is over my house right now.
Tonight, as mysterious drones continue to pop up in the skies over the East Coast.
Now it's hovering over my other neighbor's house.
Lawmakers in Washington are growing frustrated that the Biden administration isn't explaining what they are. You see the internet's running wild with conspiracy theories, and do you feel like the administration needs to fill that void?
Well, I think they should get out something as quickly as they can.
Theories are running wild about what the flying objects may be. One New Jersey congressman said they were being launched by an Iranian mothership off the Atlantic coast. The White House today saying an investigation is underway, but there is no cause for alarm.
Right now, there's just no indication that this is some sort of foreign malign activity or, in fact, even criminal.
Adding the objects being seen in the sky aren't even necessarily drones.
It appears that many of the reported sightings are actually manned aircraft that are being operated lawfully.
And while the Pentagon has said they aren't military drones and they do not come from a foreign threat, senators like New York's Kirsten Gillibrand are demanding more information.
We cannot simply say, well, they're not causing any harm. Well, do we know that? What are they doing? And who's sending them?
And Ryan Nobles joins us now from Capitol Hill. Ryan, what else can you tell us about investigations being done by the government into these drones?
Yeah, Allison, the FBI has said that they are conducting an investigation. They expect to receive support from the FAA and the Department of Homeland Security. But at this point, they have not revealed any information as to what that probe has discovered at this point, which means the mystery as to what is in the skies over the East Coast continues. Allison?
Ryan Nobles on Capitol Hill. Thank you. Heading overseas now to Syria, where a missing American man has been found after he says he was held for months by the Assad regime. But there is still no word tonight about American journalist Austin Tice, who disappeared there almost 2 decades ago, almost 12 years ago. NBC News chief foreign correspondent Richard Ingalls spoke to the freed American and has this report from Damascus.
As we drove through Damascus looking for information about missing American journalist Austin Tice, suddenly a video appeared online. An unidentified group claimed to have found an American who'd been held by the former regime. We immediately contacted our sources.
Information is coming in piecemeal. The latest that we just heard is that, yes, an American was found, but not Tice, a different American who'd been traveling in the region on some sort of pilgrimage.
He was in a small house packed with rebels, aid workers, and journalists. And there on the floor was Travis Timmerman from Missouri. As I pushed in, I knocked our microphone, making it buzz.
Was it been 7 months you've been here?
Yes, I was in prison for 7 months. But it's been okay. I'm on a pilgrimage, and that's when I was arrested.
Timmerman says he crossed into Syria from Lebanon without a visa. What did they do to you once you were picked up?
I was interviewed to see if I was a political actor, but then they cleared me, essentially, and then I was just held in prison. I wasn't beaten or anything like that.
Timmerman was freed on Monday when the rebels overthrew the government and broke into jails to free political prisoners. He was found today walking barefoot and alone.
Last night I slept outside, and then the night before that I slept with a friend, and the night before that I slept in an abandoned apartment.
Have you been in touch with your family?
I haven't, but I plan to do that when I can.
I was excited, but I was hurt.
Late today, we spoke to his mother and stepfather back in the U.S.
You always want your kids safe. You know, I don't know if he's safe right now.
You said this was a religious mission. Was this sort of like following in the footsteps of Jesus, the road to Damascus, that kind of thing?
I've heard the word of God.
He was taken outside to cheers. Now a free man after his religious journey met the harsh reality of the modern Middle East.
Timmerman told us he didn't see any other Americans while held captive by the Assad regime and knows nothing about the whereabouts of Austin Tice. Ellison?
Richard Engel in Syria, thank you. Concerns are mounting around which forces will fill the power vacuum left by Assad's ouster. For more on Syria's future, let's bring in Matthew Levitt. He is the Director of Counterterrorism and Intelligence at the Washington Institute for Near East Policy. Matthew, I want to start by asking you about some new reporting from our partners at Sky News. In an interview with Sky, the commander-in-chief of the Syrian Democratic Forces warned that ISIS is trying to exploit the turmoil in Syria. We also understand that U.S. Central Command struck dozens of ISIS targets, they say, to prevent the terror group from regaining a foothold after the Assad regime fell. Talk to us about Syria, about ISIS and their involvement there in Syria. How concerned are you about the possibility of what we're hearing from our partners at Sky News of them sort of regaining a foothold there?
I'm quite concerned, and we're hearing it not just from Sky News, but from U.S. officials. There's a reason that Central Command has carried out so many airstrikes since the fall of the Assad regime. The concern is that in this vacuum that happens, as Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, the main rebel group that is now controlling much of the country, sets itself in power, that the Islamic State could take this as an opportunity to push out of the areas it controls and attack other places. Remember that the Kurdish militias in Syria are the ones who are holding many ISIS prisoners in detention camps, and that if the rebels now holding Damascus choose to fight the Kurdish rebels, you could find a situation where some of these ISIS prisoners get out. Already the Kurdish fighters, General Mazloum, have said that they've had to stop fighting ISIS in the past few days for instead having to focus on being attacked by Turkey and Turkish-backed militias. So in this vacuum, we're all very concerned about what the Islamic State might do.
You know, when I first started seeing reports of Assad leaving, I did think back to Senator John McCain when he was alive, often making the argument that he thought the United States should have gone in earlier and tried to arm some of the rebels that the United States could potentially work with in the earlier period of the Civil War. That obviously did not happen under the Obama administration or administrations past. But I'm curious, when you look at some of the things that you mentioned from the Kurds and where they're guarding Syrian prisoners and the lack of support they say they have, and just the situation in terms of who is the right person to step in now, who is an ally that the West would support. Are we in this situation and this confusion in some part, in your opinion, because of U.S. policy in the region? And what should U.S. policy look like here going forward?
Look, I think it's a little too easy to criticize U.S. policy past. There were, in fact, efforts where the CIA provided certain types of weapons to certain elements of what was then the Free Syrian Army. and they lost them very quickly. They fell back very quickly. It didn't work. Today, the U.S. has very clear policy interests in making sure that the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham government, this is a group that came out of al-Qaeda, broke with al-Qaeda, but is still jihadist, that it does not allow Syria to become a safe haven for terrorism, that it continues to crack down on the actual al-Qaeda elements, Sadin and Islamic State, that it respects minorities and women, that it allows humanitarian aid in, and that it makes sure that Syria in no way threatens its neighbors, not Turkey, not Jordan, not Israel. These are very clear policy interests that Secretary Blinken has been pushing to all of our allies in the region very, very clearly, and he and other U.S. officials are in the region right now to try and coordinate with our allies on our policy moving forward, how to help Syria get to that point. But we need to be wary. The people who are running Syria now were al-Qaeda. They're not anymore, but they're still jihadists. And so we're not going to take them just at their word. We want to see actual actions, and based on those actions, we can consider things like removing some of the sanctions. But sanctions removal has to be earned, not gifted.
What do you think is most important from the United States perspective, or even other possible allies who could play a role in this, say Turkey, for them to see in the coming weeks as it relates to who is stepping in to fill this power vacuum?
The first thing is to make sure we're all on the same page, because Turkey, for example, is going to have an immediate interest in pushing back on the Kurdish militias. The SDF, we, the United States, have been working with very, very closely to fight the Islamic State. They've been the most effective fighters on the ground fighting the Islamic State. And so we're going to have to negotiate that with Turkey. But together, moving forward, we need to make sure that Syria is stabilized, that the various rebel groups, it's not just one, are able to get together, put together a transition government that is respecting minority rights, respecting religious freedom, respecting women, accommodating all of the Syrians who are flowing back into the country who've been displaced by the Assad regime, and making sure that Syria is not a place that is a threat to Syrians or to others in the region.
Matthew Levitt, thank you so much for your time and insights. We appreciate it. We want to stay in the Middle East, where hope for a ceasefire in Gaza is growing. Biden's national security advisor tonight says Hamas has changed its approach to negotiations following the ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah. But the situation for hostages growing increasingly desperate. Our Raf Sanchez spoke to the family of one Israeli American still trapped inside of Gaza, marking the bittersweet birthday of his one-year-old daughter, who he has never met.
Tonight, far from the noise and chaos of revolutionary Syria, U.S. and Israeli officials say there's quiet momentum towards a ceasefire deal in Gaza. President Biden's national security advisor meeting today with Israel's prime minister, saying the recent agreement to end a year of fighting between Israel and Hezbollah has breathed new life into negotiations on Gaza.
Hamas's posture at the negotiating table did adapt following the announcement of the ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon. From that moment forward, we've had a different character to the negotiation, and we believe that it puts us in a position to be able to close this negotiation.
The push, bipartisan. President-elect Trump demanding an agreement by the time he's inaugurated on January 20th. A deal would bring desperately needed relief to Palestinian civilians as winter closes in and Israeli airstrikes continue. The Gaza Health Ministry says at least 30 people were killed in the last day, while 101 hostages remain in Gaza, including 3 Americans still thought to be alive: Idan Alexander, Keith Siegel, and 36-year-old Sagi Dekelhen. This week, Sagi's family marking a bittersweet birthday. His baby daughter Shahar turning 1. She was born 2 months after her father was kidnapped on October 7th. Sagi has never held her, seen her face, and may not even know she's alive.
It's unbelievable situation for young kids to understand.
For 433 days, Sagi's wife Abital has held their family together alone.
How I can stand near to the table with cake and balloon and present and, And in the same time, my husband needs to survive.
Caring for little Shahar and her 2 older sisters. The hardest questions come from 7-year-old Bar.
She asked me why daddy is not here. She asked me, are you think he's blindfolded or he hitting him?
She has a very vivid, detailed
very
sense.
3-year-old Gali, overwhelmed. I want my daddy, she sobs.
This was a hard moment for me, and I decided to show that people must know this is my life. Present is an album.
Every year, Avital and Sagi made their daughters' photo albums on their birthdays. This year, a struggle to make Shahar's album without a single photo of her with her father.
It's not possible to give her a present, an album without her father.
An album waiting to be finished and a family waiting to be made whole.
And Raf Sanchez joins us now from Tel Aviv. Raf, you mentioned in your report that President Biden's national security advisor, Jake Sullivan, met with Prime Minister Netanyahu today. What more can you tell us about Sullivan's movements in the region and any discussions he may have had as it relates to a possible ceasefire?
So, Ellison, Sullivan is going to go on to both Egypt and Qatar is especially significant because you might remember they have been the mediators since October 7th, but they actually backed away from the process a few weeks ago, saying neither Hamas nor Israel seem serious about a deal. They are indicating now that there is seriousness. An Israeli official tells me that there is more flexibility on both sides. The Israelis prepared to show a bit of willingness about potentially removing troops from the Egypt-Gaza border, which had been a major sticking point, and Hamas potentially prepared to live with some kind of Israeli military presence inside Gaza. I can tell you something else Sullivan told us, which was actually fairly encouraging. He said that this is genuinely a bipartisan effort, that the Biden White House is really working hand in glove with the incoming Trump administration to try to get this deal over the line. President-elect Trump has actually created a certain sense of urgency, saying that there is going to be, quote, hell to pay if there is not a deal by the time he is sworn in on January 20th. And Sullivan said he's been working very, very closely with Congressman Mike Waltz, who is Trump's national security advisor incoming on this issue, trying to get a hostage deal, trying to get a ceasefire over the line.
We're back now with the growing allegations against Sean Diddy Combs. 3 men now claiming they were sexually assaulted by the music mogul in a recent slew of lawsuits that were filed today. Tonight, one of those men is speaking out to NBC's Chloe Malas.
Tonight, 3 men accusing Sean Diddy Combs of rape and sexual assault, according to separate civil lawsuits filed Thursday. The suits allege Diddy plied them with doctored drinks, then attacked them while they were unconscious.
They were all very consistent, frighteningly consistent.
New York-based attorney Thomas Giffra represents the 3 anonymous accusers.
He would lure people. He would hit them with the drinks, knock them out, and the next thing that all 3 of these guys, same thing. They'd wake up and he'd be raping them.
Kind of difficult for me.
Tonight, one of the new accusers speaking exclusively to NBC News.
Can you explain to everyone why you don't want to reveal your identity?
Well, at the top of the list, it's definitely shameful and embarrassing. And also, too, he is connected to very nefarious people.
In early 2020, he says he met with Combs at a hotel in Times Square, seeking payment for errand-type work he had completed for Diddy. He says the discussion was cordial and he had a drink.
Within 2 minutes, I started to feel just very tired, very sleepy. Mind you, I'm not under the impression that I'm being drugged or anything like that.
He says he was so groggy that he laid down on the couch.
When I finally kind of came to, I could feel myself being humped, and I could feel I was penetrated. And, I'm still kind of groggy, but I'm kind of coming out of it. He's behind me, penetrating me. I'm like, hey, what's... And the thing that sticks in my head today, the phrase that just rattles in my brain all the time is I'm almost done. Just stop moving. I'm almost finished.
In a statement to NBC News, Combs' lawyers said these complaints are full of lies. We will prove them false and seek sanctions against every unethical lawyer who filed fictional claims against him.
Combs has denied all of the allegations against him. He says that this is all a money grab. People just want to come after him for a payday. What do you say to that?
Well, I mean, as someone who tries to be fair, look at some of these high publicized cases, I do think that there are some people who just pop up out of the sky with all sorts of fictitious stories. What I can tell you is that's not me. It's not my situation.
There are now more than a dozen civil cases that have been filed against Combs, and he remains in jail awaiting trial on federal charges, including sex trafficking. He's pleaded not guilty. Ellison?
Chloe Malas, thank you. Back now with Top Stories news feed, and Vanderpump Rules reality star James Kennedy arrested over an alleged domestic violence incident. Police in California confirming to NBC News that the 32-year-old DJ was arrested on misdemeanor charges Tuesday night after officers responded to a call about a, quote, argument between a man and a woman. The star was released after posting a $20,000 bond. Reps for Kennedy have not yet commented. And in Massachusetts, a Santa Claus-style escape from police ended with that man trapped on Tuesday night. Body camera footage shows a man stuck in a narrow chimney after attempting to use it as a hiding spot from officers. Authorities say they were serving a search warrant when two men ran from the house and climbed onto the roof. First responders eventually pulled that man to safety. He was taken to the hospital and later booked on multiple charges, including drug possession. And a consumer alert, Stanley recalling more than 2 million of its mugs due to faulty lids. The recall includes the Switchback and Trigger Actions stainless steel travel mugs sold in the United States between June of 2016 up until now. The company saying it has received reports of lids detaching during use, resulting in almost 40 burn injuries worldwide. The recall covers the 12, 16, and 20-ounce cups. More information is available on NBCNews.com. And over the weekend, a scary collision between a snowboarder and a bear caught on camera at a ski resort in Lake Tahoe, California. Look at this video showing two snowboarders rapidly going downhill when a black bear suddenly appears from behind, crashing into one of the skiers before taking off running. Thankfully, no one was injured and both snowboarders kept going. That bear also seemed to be okay as it continued running away. Turning overseas now to South Korea, where protests continue to escalate as many call for the president to step down after his failed attempt to declare martial law. But the president tonight saying that he will, quote, fight to the end. NBC News international correspondent Danielle Hamamjian has more.
In South Korea tonight, protesters clashing yet again with police as the nation's embattled leader remains defiant. Demonstrators in the capital Seoul pushing towards President Yoon Suk-yeol's home, demanding his impeachment after he shocked the world by putting the country under martial law earlier this month. One saying, "Police are setting up barricades and stopping us from moving forward. I'm here as a citizen." This latest round of protests sparked by President Yoon's address on Thursday,
어떤 일이 있어도 막아야 합니다.
in which he declared, "I will fight to the end," doubling down after surviving one impeachment attempt and now facing a second. Police raiding Yoon's offices earlier this week as the president now faces a criminal investigation over the martial law order that sent troops to the streets of Seoul and would have banned political activity and censored the media. The declaration was rescinded just 6 hours later. The first person to be arrested was the former defense minister who attempted suicide in a Seoul detention center earlier this week. Yoon, who's deeply unpopular here, justified his martial law order by, in part, accusing opposition parties of being North Korean sympathizers, but not many are buying it. His own party leader calling for Yoon to be suspended immediately. South Koreans are still outraged by the president's announcement, made late in the evening on December 3rd. Citizens holding troops off outside Parliament as lawmakers try to find a way in, some climbing through windows in order to vote down the declaration. This has been the most severe political crisis South Korea has faced in decades. The country's been a linchpin of regional stability and a critical ally to the United States.
You know, the Biden administration has had a very good relationship with the Yoon team. There's been a natural chemistry between the two, and a lot has been accomplished during this administration.
And what to expect under the new administration is unclear, especially given the growing calls for President Yoon to be impeached. Danielle Hamamjian, NBC News.
Staying overseas with Top Stories Global Watch, we're starting with the deadly protest in Mozambique. Human rights groups say security forces have killed more than 110 people amid post-election protests. Mass demonstrations broke out across the country after 2 opposition leaders were assassinated 9 days after the October election. More than 3,500 protesters have been arrested so far. And officials in Ecuador say organized crime groups stole more than $215 million in fuel over the last 2 years. Thieves allegedly stealing from the country's state-run oil company by tapping pipelines, which authorities say they used to make and transport drugs. Criminals also accused of violently attacking oil fields, stealing copper, and injuring workers. And a teenager from India has become the world's youngest chess champion. Video showing the moment that 18-year-old won the final match of the World Chess Championship in Singapore. He is 4 years younger than the previous record holder and also holds the title of the world's second youngest grandmaster. He earned that at just 12 years old. When we come back, Hollywood icon Dick Van Dyke detailing his escape from the Malibu wildfire. The beloved actor saying he tried to crawl to his car to get away but couldn't get up. How his neighbors saved him as the flames closed in. We're back now with Top Stories Health Check. Tonight, the CDC reporting flu shots among kids hitting a record low in recent years. Just 37% of kids here in the U.S. received a flu vaccination as of November 30th. That number down from 43% last year. And it all comes following last year's deadly flu season. For more on this, we want to bring in NBC News medical contributor Dr. Natalie Azar. Dr. Azar, when you look at this data and the flu vaccine specifically among children, it has been kind of trending down for at least the last 5 years. How concerning is this downward trend?
Well, it concerns all of us for a number of different reasons. And I should point out that, you know, we're also following what's happening in the UK. I know we're going to talk about that in a moment. The majority of the hospitalizations and deaths that are occurring in the UK right now are between kids between the ages of 5 and 14. Last year, we had a record high number of pediatric deaths, about 205. Over 80% of those children were not fully vaccinated. And the CDC thinks that's actually an underestimate of how many kids actually probably succumbed to the flu last year, because not all children are tested for flu when they do die. And this is my big PSA out there. I get it if people are tired, if you're a parent or a middle-aged healthy adult and you're going to forego your flu shot, that's your decision. But for your children and for the children that you might be taking care of, this is incredibly important. Even an imperfect flu shot is better than none to protect these kids from hospitalization and from death.
And remind people why doctors say that. They call it like herd immunity, right? Explain to me why it's important, even if you think you're healthy, to get vaccinated to protect maybe a kid in your life.
Right. So I wish that we could talk about herd immunity like we do with measles, right? Like if everyone just got their measles shot, we wouldn't have to get it every year, and we would protect, if 98% of us got it, it would be gone. It would be eradicated. It's not quite like that with flu. But suffice it to say, if more people get vaccinated, there is less flu circulating in the environment and less vulnerable people will get sick. And the groups that we talk about are pregnant women, immunocompromised folks, kids under the age of 5, and individuals 65 and older. Those are the people that we are vaccinating our healthy selves to protect those vulnerable populations. I can't emphasize that enough.
You mentioned the UK. They're calling what's happening over there a quademic, and they mean flu, RSV, and norovirus, right? What's happening over there?
Yes. So they are seeing right now, what the UK is seeing is a pretty significant rise in flu hospitalizations and deaths over what they saw a year ago at this time. What happens in Europe is very likely going to be mirrored here in North America. You know, a lot of times we follow or we make predictions about the flu season based on what happened in the Southern Hemisphere. This past year, the Southern Hemisphere had a pretty predictably bad season. So we're not anticipating a season that's worse for us here, Ellison, than in previous years. But this is the time. This is the time that we start to see that uptick. Vaccination rates in the UK aren't that great. For people under the age of 65, only 22% are getting vaccinated. It's not good enough. Usually this year, we're targeting at about 50% of adults getting vaccinated. As we mentioned, for kids, 39% of kids are getting vaccinated this year. That's significantly lower than last year and much, much too low. But we have time to make it up. Flu season is early. We are not nearly out of the woods yet. If you get vaccinated now, you'll be protected for the holidays.
So when you look at the quademic in the United Kingdom and the impact of RSV, norovirus, flu, and COVID, should Americans look at that and say, okay, it's time now, even if we missed what we thought was the window to get vaccinated for the flu or COVID, we should all still go?
100%. 100%. So for flu and COVID, it is definitely not too late. RSV is a one and done. So if you're older and you got the RSV vaccine last year, great, you're protected. You don't need to get that repeated. Norovirus, the most common culprit of foodborne illness in this country, hand washing, and staying home if you're sick. You certainly don't want to get more than one of these bugs at the same time. You're going to feel pretty crummy.
Dr. Natalie Azar, thank you. Next to another story emerging from those devastating wildfires in Malibu, California. The erratic wind-driven Franklin fire forcing thousands to flee. We're hearing the harrowing tales of neighbors helping neighbors, and in this case, a national treasure. NBC News' Dana Griffin sat down with the one and only Dick Van Dyke, who credits his neighbors with saving him from those flames.
Yeah. Wow. You want to sit down or?
On the eve of his 99th birthday, beloved actor Dick Van Dyke invited us inside his Malibu home.
What a ham.
Oh my gosh, she's so sweet. Yeah. The screen legend, known for America's most classic film and television roles, now sharing the harrowing moment. He narrowly evacuated this week's wildfire in Malibu.
I forgot how old I am, and I realized I was crawling to get out.
What are you, like 20-something?
Up here.
As the wind-driven Franklin fire came down the canyon behind his home,
I have a fire hose that hooks up to my pool.
Van Dyke tried to douse the house, but it proved too much.
I thought, my God, I'm not going to make it out of here, because I was trying to crawl to the car. I had exhausted myself. I couldn't get up. 3 neighbors came and carried me out and came back and put out a little fire in the guest house and saved me. Thank God for them.
This Ring camera capturing Van Dyke and his wife scrambling to flee with their pets.
I don't think I would have made it.
He credits his fast-acting neighbors for saving his life and home.
The Living Museum,
which holds 7 decades of showbiz memorabilia.
God bless them, and thank you for saving my life.
A community coming together when they needed each other most. Dana Griffin, NBC News, Malibu, California.
When we return, the Taylor Swift effect, a new documentary exploring how the pop star's global impact goes far beyond her music, how her record-setting Eras tour boosted economies all around the world. Thank you so much for watching Top Story. I'm Ellison Barber in New York for Tom Llamas. Stay right there. More news is on the way.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.